Hello, and welcome to This Week in Haiti. I'm your host, Joseph Mullen, and we're doing a new segment for each Wednesday when the paper premieres, which is the issue review. And as the name suggests, it's a bit of a double entendre. It's the issue review going through our physical copy of the paper itself, but it's also breaking down the issues through the headlines of each edition to tell you the most important news of the week as it's coming out on Wednesday. The paper is available for free online at HaitiLiberté.com, but each week, as we update the new flipping book paper, you have to be a subscriber, go into the archive to get that paper. So we're doing this each week so you can also get a taste of the most important news broken down on our podcast about the paper, which unfortunately many people may not have gotten a chance to get a physical copy of it, partially due to the restrictions placed by the US government on distribution to Haiti in particular. So we're going to begin breaking down the paper. We have our physical copy for the week, and as a last thought before I jump right in, this is a way of getting a glimpse of the smorgasbord of information that papers, physical copies can be, and thankfully having our 21st century technology to bring that straight to you. So we'll begin by breaking down our paper for the week, which was for the week of the 1st of October to the 7th of October. And we have our paper right here. This is the cover of Haiti Liberté. We have our cover story, which is La force de répression impérialiste votée à l'ONU, which we will go into more. This is on page 4, breaking down the UN vote. We have an article by Marie-Laurette Nouma, which is S'agit-il d'un mouvement de la génération Z? Again, we'll break this down a little bit more, talking about Gen Z protests across the world. And again, for those who haven't seen a copy of the paper, we may not go through this each different week, having this side panel layout, but it is interesting and important to see how there is a small picture with a description and the headline of the articles of the week. For example, on page 6, Dimitri Vorb arrested in Miami. On page 7, progressive organizations rejecting the UN intervention. Page 9, the rushing of the gang suppression force, which we'll go more into. And the speech of Gustavo Petro, page 10. Page 17, Canadian postal workers going on strike. So you have a breakdown of the paper on the side. So to begin with our editorial of the week, this is by our director, Bertini Dupont. Our editorial for the week, the headline title is Y a-t-il une véritable guerre en Haïti? This is our next section, À travers Haïti, and the headline for the week is S'agit-il d'un mouvement de la génération Z? And I should mention as well that the paper is in HTML format online, so as I'm reading the French titles, I won't translate it too much, but you can do so if you'd like, using the HTML format to go translate the articles, which are in French. But this article, as I mentioned, has a couple of pictures, and it's talking about social media and the Gen Z movement in Haiti and Nepal, because this is truly an international paper. We talk about primarily focusing on Haiti and then spreading out, discussing the movement in Nepal, which has been taking place. So, excellent article. Continuing in our section, À travers Haïti, we have really the headline story for the week and the critical news with respect to Haiti for the week, which is the forcing through of a gang suppression force resolution. I will break that down more in This Week in Haiti, the English section of the paper, but we have the French headline, which is, as I read, La force de répression impérialiste votée à l'ONU. And this is the article by Kim Ives for the week, which I will discuss in the English section this week in Haiti. We always have a section which is discussing the news in the Dominican Republic because it's very important, even though the island of Hispaniola was divided by the imperialists and the colonialists, it is still an integral part of the liberation struggle in Haiti. So we have the section which is À travers la République Dominicaine, and the headline article for the week from the Dominican Republic is Le pillage du Senasa montre que la véritable fardeau pour la santé publique est ce gouvernement voleur. We also have in this section as well the speech of Benjamin Netanyahu, who was boycotted by many delegates at the United Nations, and the headline article is unfortunately implicating the Dominican Republic as not one of those governments that boycotted. And the headline is Le gouvernement dominicain était l'un des complices de Netanyahu à l'ONU. We have a section in Creole each week entitled the Chronique Creole, and this section, the articles are in Creole for Creole readers. This week's articles, the first article of the week, there's a picture of the lawyer Albert Joseph, and the headline is Avocat Albert Joseph assassiné. There's another article about New York City Mayor Eric Adams ending his campaign for the mayoralty. He ended his campaign this week, and the title is Eric Adams retire candidature pour un autre mandat. There's an article, bit of poetry and philosophical discussion of which the title is Philosophie. There's an article discussing the arrest of Dimitri Vorb, and there's a picture of him as well under arrest. Dimitri Vorb arrêté Miami. And we have finally more poetry as well, which is Nous c'est travailler. In our perspective section, which goes into more of the discussion of the vote at the United Nations, we have our title, which is Des organisations progressistes rejettent une nouvelle intervention de l'ONU. And this is talking about the organization Contre Peuple, which is protesting and rejecting the UN intervention, which is impending as of this week. We have a section, and now it is in the 27th edition, which is Haiti d'une transition à l'autre. This section, which is done by the author Catherine Charlemagne, talks about the continued transition and the continued stillborn transition, or continued corruption of the transition in Haiti. And so this article, the 27th edition for this continuing series, is 7 février 2026 en perspective, l'option corps de cassation refait surface. And we have, and I should say before we continue, that this is the Corps de Cassation, the body like the Supreme Court, which constitutionally should be handling these matters. And I think readers will enjoy this article by Catherine Charlemagne, breaking down more of the nitty-gritty of the transition in Haiti, details that you won't really find in Western media. There's a lot of very important information in here, which is really well done. And as you can see, these are long articles. It's the 27th edition, and these are really good to break down the quote-unquote transition and all the corruption that is entailed. So we have our English section, the title of which this section gives the name for our podcast, This Week in Haiti. And this is, in this English section, talking about really, again, the critical news for this week. The UN rushes its gang suppression force, in quotation marks, gang suppression force, through the UN Security Council, despite protests and warnings from Russia and China. And this article is by Kim Ives. this article really talks about how this gang suppression force, as they are calling it, we've discussed this in our other editions of the podcast, but I'm going to read the first couple of sentences of this article just so audio listeners, video listeners, if you're listening while perhaps you're doing other chores, you really take a second to hear what's going on after this was passed. There's no other crisis that's bigger in the Western Hemisphere than this one in Haiti, said U.S. Charge d'Affaires Henry Worcester in a September 22nd, 2025 press conference in New York on the margins of the United Nations Annual General Assembly. Washington has a lot riding on its new, quote, gang suppression force, which it proposed to the UN Security Council on August 28th to replace the multinational security support mission, whose mandate ends on October 2nd, tomorrow. To start with, the GSF aims to have 5,500 troops, both soldiers and police, rather than the MSS's 1,000 police officers. 5,500 troops, that's what the United States has proposed in its new imperialist intervention force to go to Haiti, which, as I can only reiterate, threatens to turn Haiti into another Gaza, because that level of deployment of foreign forces really hasn't been seen since 1915, 1934, the last U.S. Boots on the ground occupations which fought the Keko resistance of freedom fighters. And again, can only reiterate as we're just going through the paper that this is really a critical moment because of the volume of force that the U.S. is proposing to go into Haiti.
I'll just add that there were U.S. troops in 94 and 2004 too.
Right. So, again, a critical, a real, serious possibility of devastation, for lack of a better word. But again, if you would like to read that article in full, you can go through. You can also see the resistance, which is very critical to highlight. Resistance protest, which was held by Black Alliance for Peace, the Haiti and the Caribbean organizing contingent, had a protest outside the UN, and we have a picture of that as well. We had attendees go to that protest to show that this massive force, there is a counterbalance to them. And so the article continues and breaks down, as we've said in past episodes, just the criminality of the U.S. leading this proposal. Our centerfold for the week. This article is broken across 2 pages, and it is really, this week, it is a breakdown. Usually the centerfold for each week is an international article of some sort, and this one is very much related to Haiti, but it's taking a critical lens on the speech of Gustavo Petro. So the headline for the article is Discours du président colombien Gustavo Petro à l'ONU. And this speech, if listeners hadn't gotten a chance to watch it, is very good. It's rhetoric, very impactful. Gustavo Petro trying to walk a fine line between the status that many nations in the global south are delegated to have and forced to have, which is satellite comprador states and the semi-periphery, but at the same time trying to show solidarity, in particular with Palestine, trying to show solidarity more so, with other surrounding nations, Venezuela and Haiti in particular. And Gustavo Petro, as the recently elected leader who was formerly a member of the resistance movements in Colombia to U.S. imperialism, has taken a very strong line with his rhetoric invoking Mao Zedong, and pushing back on the narratives that the United States is pushing. One, for example, which is that that they try to push this all the time, that Venezuela, Colombia, that these are narco states, that these are drug trafficking states. And Gustavo Petro took a very firm stance against that, saying, well, who really is, the world's largest narco state? But also that the rhetoric of Trump in particular to justify the strikes against Venezuela, that has to be condemned in full force. And so Gustavo Petro has made a very powerful intervention at the UN. It's worth getting a watch, if you can, amongst all the other speeches which were made by Niger, by Mali, by Burkina Faso. So that's our centerfold article. In the perspective section, we have an article discussing NATO and the continued NATO tactics for building up pressure and continuing to encroach on Russia in particular, but in general expanding a global NATO to really have a presence all over the world. So the title for the article is Faire échec aux guerres de l'OTAN pour maintenir l'hégémonie impérialiste. We have the picture for this article showing the flags of Poland, America, the United Kingdom, France, and Croatia, and just some of the nations which have formed this imperialist coalition to continue to expand European hegemony and conquest throughout the world. So that article definitely worth checking out. And next in our section, a really, really fascinating article. This article was from the Palestine Chronicle from the 21st of July in 2015. Well, it was republished from there. It was translated by the Gazette du Citoyen Investigation from the 25th of September of this year, so translated 10 years later into French. And it is, the title in this section, Devoir de Mémoire, is Grâce à la visite de Che Guevara à Gaza en 1959, la Palestine devient une cause mondiale. Really showing the internationalism of Che Guevara as a anti-imperialist leader and theoretician, the Foucault theory, trying to expand that to even in the early stages of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, before his more famous solidarity missions in the Congo and in Bolivia, his visit to Gaza in 1959, and how Palestine became a global cause. And some of these pictures are incredible to look at. Che with Nasser, shaking hands, Che meeting various delegates of the Palestinian resistance movement. So really showing how Palestine was central to Cuba from the very beginning. That Cuba has been a key supporter of Palestine, and also that Che in particular, as the embodiment of the new man spirit and ethos, would lead these international solidarity missions, as said in the Congo, but that he began his internationalism, like in the Motorcycle Diaries, with Palestine, one of the most important visits that he made. So that article, worth checking out. Continuing in our perspective section, this is our section that covers a lot of important issues across the world. We have l'effronterie des mensonges du Trump. And you can see by the picture here Trump's continuing lies and talking about giving himself the Nobel Peace Prize and denying climate change, for example. So usually we don't overly fixate on American news, but of course Trump, he made his speech at the UN and continued to lie about Venezuela, continued to lie about Haiti, of course. Nothing new from Trump, but worth checking out. This article is by Claudia Alrunda. Worth checking out there. And this article comes to us from translation from Spanish, Jeanette Baudelaire from Presenza News. Next in the perspective section, we have Les États-Unis ont révoqué le visa du pétrole. This, we were just discussing Petro's intervention at the UN, and this is for those who don't know French, who may be English listeners who are just tuning in to this. I will translate this one. Simply put, the U.S. revoked the visa of Petro after his intervention, and it's interesting that In this picture for the article, Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia, has the keffiyeh on. This is his way of showing solidarity with Palestine. His speech was very much about the continuing Israeli apartheid in Palestine, and that Colombia, amongst really many of the nations of the global south, really are standing with Palestine, and that the U.S., of course, the biggest supporter of Israeli apartheid, has revoked the visa of the president of Colombia. So very, very much unwarranted, hostile diplomatic action. We have, continuing in the section À travers le monde, we have an article, La Chine appuie la demande d'adhésion de la Palestine au BRICS. So China pushing for the joining of the Palestinian state. Some may say the new Palestinian state, according to the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada. These imperialist nations may be making a concession and recognizing a state of Palestine. That China is pushing for the joining of this Palestinian state to BRICS. And of course, across the world, a story that's very important to focus on, États du Sahel, le Mali, le Burkina Faso et le Niger se retirent de l'accord pénal international, leaving the International Criminal Court. And a very important read from Al-Mayadeen from 2021. This is an important article worth reading, continuing to follow the events in the Sahel, which are critically related to Haiti. This article from across the world, Les travailleurs du Poste Canada en grève nationale, and that article is from Aporia. This is news from September of this year, so breaking news right now from Canada. We have a headline discussing the story of Maduro. Maduro, nous gagnons la bataille pour la vérité, from RT News from Russia, and worth checking out. Maduro continuing to seek truth, really, because the U.S. lies so frequently about Venezuela, that Maduro and that these nations are leading the struggle for truth. And as Fidel Castro said many times, the struggle for an alternative sovereignty for the global south, which is very important. And we have an article, really some very sad news from this week that occurred, and is of course critically related to Haiti as well. Décès à Cuba de la révolutionnaire Assata Shakur, figure clé du mouvement de libération afro-américaine aux États-Unis. The death of Assata Shakur is very tragic news. Unfortunately, just not much more to say than that. It's tragic news because she was such a beloved figure and was forced to live in exile in Cuba. She wasn't even allowed to, and I don't know off the top of my head, for example, whether she was allowed to see her daughter, who has been separated from her for a long time because of the U.S. Criminal policy towards her, forcing her to live in exile in Cuba, but at the same time the solidarity of Cuba to help her escape from the catchers of the United States and the constant warrants and belligerence that the U.S. imposed against her. So just very tragic news. And that is the final headline for the week. We have some of our ads for the week posted on the final page. But thank you for tuning in for this issue review on Wednesday, October 1st for our issue of the week. We'll be back each Wednesday breaking down each issue, talking more in depth about the headlines and giving you a behind-the-scenes look at the real issues for the week from Haiti to the entire world. I've been your host, and see you next time.
"24 minutes?
It said how much? 24?
Sorry.